Hello, all you dreamers and dreams out there, and welcome to Undeclared Bajor. This is Undeclared Bajor, the best Star Trek DS9 discussion podcast in the world. My name is Fletcher, about to say hello is Data.
Yo!
Today we're going to discuss and review Star Trek DS9 Season 6, Episode 13, Far Beyond the Stars. Alternate title, The Inner City Light.
Okay.
How about The Inner Madmen?
We're getting farther away.
Oh dear. I don't think I can get closer. I think that's as close as I could get.
Okay.
Meta. I had Meta, The Inner Light, and Mad Men, and I was trying to do something with that, but just couldn't. Well, we will be discussing spoilers for Star Trek DS9 up through this episode, but not after this episode, so it is safe to watch along with us if this is your first experience with Star Trek DS9, but we also spoil other stuff unapologetically, so watch out.
Now I'm sitting here trying to come up with an alternate title. You did better than me. The only thing I can come up with is racism. I hardly knew him. No, yeah, see. So yes, spoiling things. Right.
If you have a better title, put it in the comments.
Yeah, there you go.
But the what's the actual title? Far Beyond the Stars originally aired February 11th, 1998. It was written by Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler. Story by Mark Scott Zicree.
Something like that. This apparently he wrote a story for a Next Gen episode, the episode First Contact. So This isn't his first Star Trek rodeo, but other than that, he's kind of just worked on sci-fi stories or sci-fi shows. Like he did He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and I love how the thing says featuring the voice of Alan Oppenheimer. Just so that you know that.
Okay.
The Real Ghostbusters, Swamp Thing, Babylon 5, Sliders, and William Shatner's Tech War.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah.
Tech War. I guess there's kind of some similarities between this episode and First Contact. I mean, that took place in kind of a modern day type. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, and it was directed by Avery Brooks.
Yeah, apparently, like, this episode is sort of unique among Star Trek episodes in that it is, like, the only episode directed by one of the actors where that actor also, like, had the main role in the episode. Like, you know, generally they don't let you direct an episode that you're also, like, in practically every scene of, because that's more difficult. But when it came to this one, they were just like, yeah, we got to have Avery direct this one.
Yeah, maybe at least one African American person should be involved in the creative. I don't know what the deal with Mark Scott Zicree is, but be a little weird.
Yeah.
And Avery Brooks not doing his usual weirdness. So
no, he was doing.
It's like he took it seriously or something. I don't know.
Apparently, he was very, very intense about making sure that everything looked like the 1950s. There's several comments by, like, Michael Dorn and other people here about, like, yeah, he was just on top of, like, making sure everything looked like the 50s.
I was pretty impressed with, like, all the era appropriate cars and street scenes and stuff.
I mean, that must have been expensive.
It didn't look... It kind of compared to Little Green Men, which all took place in, like, one room. And we didn't really get a lot of, like, huge attempts to make us believe that was the world of the 40s or whatever.
That's true. I hadn't... Yeah.
And although there was one shot that was obviously stock footage, but won't hold that against him. I'm sure it looked better on TV.
So here's the... So Ira Steven Behr and supervising producer Steve Oster, they're like, we're talking about who should direct it, and they're like, maybe Avery? Even though he's, like, in every frame of the episode.
Uh-huh.
And so they
sometimes more than once.
Yeah. they went and talked to him, and they're like, look, this isn't the episode of the season you were scheduled to direct, but, like, here's kind of what the episode's about. Would you be interested in directing that? And Avery Brooks was like, yes, I would. I want to do that episode.
Nice. Well, at least he wasn't pressured into it or anything.
Yeah, he says that he was pleased with the assignment, because of the writing of it, because it talked about 1953, because it talked about who we are, or who we were, this idea of this brown man writing this science fiction. I thought that was incredibly clever.
Sure. And Sirach Lofton is in this episode.
Yeah, he is.
And he's doing a thing.
He's doing some stuff, yep.
Jake Sisko is not in the episode, though, and I'm sure you've got some note about all the actors who appear in this episode, but their normal characters don't.
Actually, yeah, but that one doesn't even mention Jake Sisko. It's like, let's see. Although Renee Auberjonois, Armin Shimmerman, and Colm Meaney appear in the episode, their regular characters Odo Quark and Miles O'Brien do not. Nor are Aaron Eisenberg and J.G. Hertzler seen in their roles of Nog and Martok.
Mm-hmm. But pour one out for the Cortez and Captain Swafford. Sisko sits behind his desk in a pile of pads as Kira briefs him on the failed search efforts after the Cortez went missing near the Cardassian border. Even if the Jem'Hadar didn't get them, it's fair to say they probably got eaten by a giant space moth, or accidentally traveled back in time to ancient Egypt, or got trapped by Q in a never-ending production of Don Quixote, or the entire crew got Tuvixed, or something like that. This universe is filled with many fates worse than death.
Oh man, the entire crew getting Tuvixed. There's a great episode of Lower Decks where the whole crew starts getting Tuvixed.
Nice.
It's great. Yeah.
Is it like that episode of Futurama where they have to prove the theorem that you can switch everybody back?
No, I mean that's not so Tuvixy, the brain switching. That's like a whole different sci-fi trope.
I feel like it's near Tuvix. I don't know. Maybe not.
When they first mentioned the Cortez, I was like, "Oh no, isn't that Charlie Reynolds' ship?" But
no, wasn't that the Centaur?
It was the Centaur. Yeah. I had to look it up. Good to know Charlie's still out there fighting the good fight.
Oh yeah. Did he survive that big battle? I don't remember.
I don't think we know.
I assume he did. He's Charlie Reynolds.
Yeah, nothing can kill Charlie Reynolds. Obviously.
He's indestructible. Have we ever heard of the Cortez and Captain Swafford?
Have we heard of the Cortez? I don't remember hearing of Captain Swafford. But let's see. The Cortez was
sounds
present.
Really familiar.
The Cortez was part of the assault force assembled to retake Deep Space Nine. They were ordered to fall back for repairs after signaling that they were having problems with their guidance thrusters. So that's apparently a time they were mentioned. And then eventually they did join the battle and were one of the first ships to break through the Dominion fleet, as was reported in Sacrifice of Angels. So,
okay.
They were around a little bit.
I assume the ship isn't named after Cortez, the guy who conquered the Incas or whoever, right?
I mean, according to this, yes, it is named for Hernan Cortez.
Okay. Interesting choice. But you'd think the Federation might shy away from the symbolism of that, but...
You might think that, yeah. You would be wrong.
So... Anyway, Sisko's in low spirits. Kira walks out and hands him off to his dad, visiting from Earth, continuing the tradition of civilians casually vacationing in the middle of this war zone.
Yeah. Is it just me, or could they have made a much more interesting thing out of, like, Sisko's dad visiting the station? I feel like it's like, hey, his dad's here. It doesn't really have anything to do with what's going on, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. He doesn't really... Because you think, if Sisko is kind of having this personal crisis, his dad would have more of a direct role to play in that, but in helping him through that or whatever. But I guess a vision of his dad can also do that. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
So, Sisko confides to his father that he's almost at his breaking point. He's seriously considering quitting. At this point, he doesn't know what would give him the will to keep going, short of, say, a hypothetical alternate segregation-era America where his position as a black commanding officer of a space station would be an inspiring symbol to any marginalized black people that were reading about him or watching TV or something. What a weird thing to say, says Joe Sisko. Then Ben sees a strange man walk past his office door. It looks like Odo would look if he were transformed into a human and his face wasn't left like a changeling face as part of the punishment. But nobody else saw this person. Later, Sisko's taking a stroll with Cassidy, who I totally forgot existed.
Yeah, apparently, like, this is literally the first time she's been on the show since, what was that last appearance? Rapture in season 5. Yeah. And that's because she had a commitment to the Larry Sanders show, and so she's been busy.
Penny Johnson.
Yep, good job, Penny. Glad you got work.
Yeah, I assume Cassidy wasn't on the Larry Sanders show.
I mean, she could have been, but...
True. It's bad to assume. You're right.
I like... There's another note relating to Penny Johnson in that, despite the fact that Worf, or rather Michael Dorn, has made a total of 282 Star Trek appearances, this is the only time he's seen as a human. However, he did appear without his Klingon makeup as Boralon in the Next Generation episode Homeward, which also featured Penny Johnson.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, bet you didn't know that.
It's all connected.
I don't remember what Homeward is about. I'm going to have to find out now.
I totally do not remember what that...
Oh, that's the one with his foster brother. When, he has to disguise himself as one of the natives to go down to the planet and try to save the pre-warp civilization. Okay, yeah.
So I totally lost my place. Giant space moth. Oh yeah. So he's walking down, he's taking a stroll with Cassidy when a guy who looks kind of like Worf except human walks by wearing the uniform of the New York Giants baseball team. Now the San Francisco Giants. He greets Captain Sisko cheerfully and then ducks in a doorway. Sisko asks Cassidy who that was, and Cassidy says, "Who was who?" "Oh, you mean Willie the baseball player? He's been on the station a few months. I assumed you knew him." But no, Sisko follows the baseball player through the door and finds himself somewhere else. A busy, mid-20th century looking street. Then he gets hit by a taxi.
Man, yeah, it sucked the way that he died immediately after the story started.
Thus ends Captain Sisko. He comes to in sick bay, or the infirmary, where Dr. Bashir informs him he's having the same weird brain readings he did that one time he went all Close Encounters and discovers that lost city.
Yeah, weird synaptic potentials and stuff.
It's like, have you run into any lightning hands aliens lately? He hands Sisko a pad as proof, but suddenly the pad turns into the September 1953 issue of Galaxy Science Fiction. Except that's not the 1953 issue of Galaxy Science Fiction, as I discovered, because the Internet Archive has all the old issues of Galaxy.
Nice.
And I was able to pull up the full issue, and it is completely different from the one portrayed.
Well, did you investigate all other issues to see if one looked like that?
I mean, most of them had thumbnails of the covers, not all of them. Because that's what I did first, is I just tried looking for the thumbnail that matched that cover.
Yeah. And
then there was none, so I just, sorted by date and went to the September 1953 one. And it is completely different. I have it right here. The cover story is The Touch of Your Hand by Theodore Sturgeon. Not Court Martial by Samuel T. Cogley. And I googled Samuel T. Cogley, and I suspect there's a rabbit hole to go down there because.
So yeah, I got the note on this. I just want to see how far we were going to go here.
Yeah.
So the Galaxy magazine cover art is a matte painting of Starbase 11, which was seen in the Star Trek: The Original Series episode Court Martial. Additionally, Court Martial is the featured story and shown being written by Samuel Cogley, who was an attorney defending James T. Kirk in the original series episode. Similarly, the cover of Astounding Science Fiction, read by Casey Hunter, features the matte painting of Iminiar 7 from A Taste of Armageddon.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know what clues this gives us towards the nature of this reality, but something weird might be going on here. I don't know.
I also like to note that although Incredible Tales is a fictional magazine, their competitor, Galaxy Science Fiction, was an actual science fiction digest magazine published from 1950 to 1995, and it featured writings from such greats as Robert Heinlein, Ray Bradbury, and Theodore Sturgeon. So there you go.
Wow, just like what Rossoff said. Yeah, and I looked at the Wikipedia for Galaxy, and there's a fun little thing in there where it's like it has like a side-by-side science fiction story and Western story, but just like the science fiction elements and Western elements are switched out. And it's like, can't tell the difference? That's because, we don't do this. We don't just take Westerns and like put sci-fi paint on them. We tell real sci-fi stories or whatever.
Oh, well.
So I was, that's kind of cute. Anyway, the person handing Cisco the magazine is a newsboy who looks a lot like Nog, now with a New York-ish accent.
I think it's maybe the only time we see Aaron Eisenberg out of the makeup.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance. But he prefers war stories to science fiction.
Yeah, much more exciting.
Then Chief O'Brien walks up wearing a tweed suit and chewing on a pipe, and occasionally doing some kind of American accent, I think. He greets the captain as Benny. And indeed, the captain is no longer the captain. He's Benny. And this is his time and place. The chief, now named Albert, asks Benny if he wants to head to the office together, while searching himself for his pack of matches. Benny finds the matches for him, and they head off to work. So,
apparently, they modeled some of these people in the office we're about to arrive at, including Chief O'Brien, not Chief O'Brien, on some specific writers, but I'm having trouble finding that note. So.
I'm guessing Chief O'Brien is Isaac Asimov, because he likes robots, and he sells a novel to Gnome Press, which is who first published iRobot.
Yeah, Albert Macklin was intended as an homage to Isaac Asimov. Indeed, Albert's first novel was published by Gnome Press, as was Asimov's debut book in 1950, a collection of short stories entitled iRobot.
Yeah, I googled Gnome Press, and they were, I guess, a relatively short-lived publisher, but they published a lot of the great classics of sci-fi. So who else we got?
So when we get in to the office here, let's see.
Okay, sure. Okay, yeah. Well, because I have a feeling I also know who Kira is based on. But
okay, well, who do you think?
Okay, wait. I have to go get the book that is on my nightstand, because I think it has a short story by this person in it. So, because I recently discovered this person, but okay, so at the offices of Incredible Tales, I think that's what it's called.
Yes, Incredible Tales.
A woman who looks like Kira makes instant iced tea over a newspaper that says Reds Test H-Bomb, which is a real thing that happened in 1953.
Oh. Technically, the magazine appears to be called Incredible Tales of Scientific Wonder.
Okay, nice.
And I don't even remember when we saw this cover of Incredible Tales in the episode, but the March...
It was it was in that scene when she's making the iced tea.
So, March 1953... cover of Incredible Tales features The Cage, first of a new series by E.W. Roddenberry, author of Questor. Also, a complete short novel, The Corbomite Maneuver. Journey to Babel by D.C. Fontana, Metamorphosis, Where No Man Has Gone Before, and more. Amazing science fiction.
Cute Easter eggs or hints at deep lore? You decide.
The cover shows the surface of Delta Vega from Where No Man Has Gone Before. Also, apparently, the offices of Incredible Stories are in the Arthur Trill building, a reference to the Trill species and the real-life Brill building.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, a dapper Englishman resembling Dr. Bashir does not approve of the iced tea, because he's an Englishman.
Yep.
And a little bald man who resembles Quark does not approve of the donuts, and complains to the magazine editor, who is Odo Guy. So these people are Kay and Julius Eaton, which I didn't even realize until I looked up their IMDb after watching the episode that they were intended to be married. Herbert Rossoff is Quark, and Douglas Pabst is Odo. And the person I think that Kay Eaton is based on is James Tiptree Jr.
Nope. So, Kay Eaton, who writes under the name Casey Hunter to hide her gender, was a version of Catherine Moore, who similarly wrote under the name C.L. Moore.
Okay.
As well as Star Trek's own DC Fontana, who wrote on the original series. But when I read that, I had to go and look up, and because apparently this Catherine Moore, she married a fellow sci-fi writer named Henry Kuttner, and then the two of them mostly wrote together until his death. So like she was active writing from like the 30s to the 70s or something, and she met him in 1936 when he wrote a fan letter to C.L. Moore thinking that it was a man, and then they started collaborating, and they wrote some titles that might be familiar to people, such as Mimsy Were the Borogroves, which the last Mimsy, the movie, was based off of. But she also wrote some fairly popular short stories during, her tenure. She was also going to be she was nominated as the first female Grand Master of the Science Fiction Writers of America Society in the 80s, which apparently that's a fairly prestigious thing that they hand out not even every year. Starting in 75 with Robert Heinlein was the first Grandmaster. And so there's some pretty, like Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, Alfred Bester, Ray Bradbury, like they don't just hand these Grandmaster titles out to anybody. And she was going to be the first
I assume it's like a chess Grandmaster. It's a pretty lofty sounding title.
But by then she apparently had Alzheimer's, and her family felt that like trying to put her in this awards ceremony would be confusing and probably upsetting for her. So they kind of passed on that. But it did lead me down like kind of a rabbit hole, and I read a couple of her stories. She wrote multiple stories about a couple of different characters, most famously a character called Northwest Smith, who is like a rogue adventurer who wanders the solar system. And the most famous story featuring Northwest Smith is from the 1933 issue of Weird Tales, although it's been republished lots of times. It is called Shambleau, and it was kind of fascinating, honestly. It's very, very strange, but kind of interesting. And the other one that I read by her, which was like, I think it was listed in here as like her most famous one. Now I gotta find the title again because I pulled it up online and read it, but it's so Shambleau is it's supposed to be like a space Medusa thing. The conceit of at the beginning of the story is like some legends on Earth are just clearly too freaking strange to have ever originated on Earth, and they actually originate because like at some point in the distant past, man went to space and met weird shit and brought these stories back. And so, like, Medusa is one of those. And so it's a very odd
some ancient
story.
aliens stuff going on.
Yeah, kinda. But the other one was called No Woman Born, which she wrote. Let's see, it's a novella that is considered like one of her best works, basically. And so I also read that, and then that one's really interesting. It's about like a famous singer / dancer, I guess, in the 40s who get like there's a fire that burns her pretty much to death, but then experimental science saves her and like puts her in a robot body, and it's
nice.
It's like surprisingly like emotional. Like I really enjoyed it. It's a great story. So I would recommend
Nice.
checking out No Woman Born from 1944 if you were interested in this sort of sci-fi thing that the episode is about.
Maybe I will remember to put a link to that in the description.
There you go.
Or maybe I will forget. Yeah, this story I read not too long ago in this book I got, The Big Book of Cyberpunk, which is not an official cyberpunk story, but like every section of this book starts with a story that is a classic sci-fi story that kind of like is a precursor to cyberpunk.
Okay.
But this story is called The Girl Who Was Plugged In by James Tiptree Jr. And it's about, it's a weird story. It's about like a girl who gets a job remote controlling like basically an avatar body of basically what is a social media influencer.
Huh.
So her fake body is described as a 15-year-old girl, and there's all this kind of like uncomfortably pervy talk about how hot this 15-year-old girl body is. I was like, what is this? Who is this guy? And I looked it up, and James Tiptree Jr. is actually the pen name of a female writer whose name I do not have directly in front of me. But I was reading on her Wikipedia page. Apparently, the fact that she was a woman was kept secret for a long time.
Yeah, apparently that was a like they talk about in the episode, like, yeah, people wouldn't buy it if there was a woman or a black guy writing the story. Apparently, they're not wrong. Like, there's a reason that like that people were hiding their identities like that, and it was not an isolated thing.
Yeah, because I was reading about this, and like even a lot of like big name sci-fi, right? Because there was always rumors that it was a woman, but nobody knew her, so nobody like knew for sure. And there's a lot of like big name sci-fi writers who are like, it can't be a woman. Her writing is like too good and manly and stuff. So, and it wasn't revealed until like, I think the 70s or 80s that she was actually a woman. So, pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But, I guess the target audience for science fiction in those days might have been a little put off by a woman writer. Or I guess that was at least the conventional wisdom or something. I don't know. So, anyway, back to whatever we were talking about.
Something.
Yeah, the Rossoff, the court guy, is not happy with the donuts. Pabst claims the donuts are no older than 6 hours. And an indignant Rossoff says, "That's it, I'm going to Galaxy." As if you can just like pack up and go work for Galaxy.
Well, I mean, I guess they seem to be like, they just pay you by the word for stories or whatever. So I mean, you may just be anybody maybe be able to come in and like give a story.
True. So yeah, Pabst offers him fresh donuts. So are you saying the donuts aren't fresh?
Yeah, right. That's what I was thinking. Like, so that 6 hours thing, that was just bull, huh? All right.
Right. And throws in a couple of crawlers, and so Rossoff caves and stays.
So I don't know if it's this scene or another scene, but in one of these scenes where Rossoff is arguing with Pabst, I think it is this scene because it says when he threatens to quit. There's a silver thing on his desk that is an actual Hugo Award that was loaned to the production by Rick Sternbach, who had won it for Best Professional Artist.
Oh, nice. Oh, and did we say who Rossoff is based off of? Or does it say?
They did not say anything about that, no.
Oh, okay.
Also, there's apparently a note, a memo from Pabst above his desk that says, "No one would believe a cheerleader could kill vampires." A clear reference to Buffy, where Armin Shimmerman had a recurring role. Buffy would later return this homage in an episode of its last season where they feature a Spock lookalike.
So, not quite a direct Deep Space Nine homage, but...
No.
Then Pabst calls it a man named Ritterhouse to show off his latest drawings. Roy Ritterhouse is Martok, but with 2 eyes and chomping on a cigar. So apparently the workflow with this magazine is Roy draws a picture, Pabst comes up with a title for the picture, and then the writers pick out which one they want to write.
Yeah, that does seem to be the thing. Although, a funny note in here is that, like, in the script, the drawing Honeymoon on Andorras did not have a title. So I don't know if that means they came up with it on set, or maybe it was just added later, but the random little note.
The first up is Please Take Me With You, which is a couple of bug-eyed Martians hanging out with a little girl. The Edens take that one, while Rossoff poo-poos it. But then he picks Honeymoon on Andorras, which is a giant mantis and a scantily clad woman. And he says the picture may be garbage, but the story will be art. I kind of have my doubts, but...
Well, when I went into the Rossoff article on the wiki, it says he was partly intended to be a hot-headed analog for author Harlan Ellison.
Ah, the famously litigious Harlan Ellison. He claimed that he had the idea for Terminator, and so that's why the credits for Terminator start inspired by the works of Harlan Ellison, which James Cameron famously hates and despises.
See, I don't know all that much about Harlan Ellison, except that he's featured in the J. Michael Straczynski autobiography somewhat heavily, because apparently JMS was a big fan of him, and Harlan Ellison, just put his phone number somewhere that was, people could call him. And so he calls him, and he picks up, and JMS is asking for advice about being a writer, and Harlan Ellison was very curt with him, although he did give some advice, just some very rude advice. And then later in life they became good friends, and JMS was actually the executive for his estate when Harlan Ellison died.
Huh. Yeah, all I know is little half-remembered tidbits about Harlan Ellison. For one thing, I think he's known for being a huge anti-plagiarism and idea theft. I think he pitched an idea to a TV studio, and then they rejected it, and then they made a TV show that was almost identical to what he pitched, and he sued them and won.
Nice.
And but he was also well known for just being litigious in general, and seeming to have the belief that basically once he came up with an idea, he was the only person capable of original ideas, and he owned anything vaguely related to it, which is how he got his name on the Terminator movie. So I don't know. Interesting sounding guy anyway. So
apparently he wrote the episode of the original series, The City on the Edge of Forever.
Oh yeah.
It says, was an American author, producer, and writer credited with writing City on the Edge of Forever, which is a subject of controversy.
Yeah, I've heard something about that where he didn't like how it turned out or something like that. I forgot.
Oh.
Or it got rewritten. I forgot. This is all half-remembered stuff I read a long time ago, so I'm sure people listening know way more about Harlan Ellison than we do. So, but then we come out with the last picture, which looks a lot like DS9. In fact, it has DS9 written on it, and it grabs Benny's attention. Then it's on to the next item of business. They want to do an issue with photos of the writers. Pabst advises Kay to call in sick that day. Benny says, I suppose I should too, and Pabst says, whew, I didn't want to say anything. I'm glad you did. Which, again, I know I have white privilege or whatever, but if someone tried to insinuate I should not come in for photo day, that is the day I absolutely 100% would come in. But
see, I don't have white privilege. I don't know.
Yeah.
I am less white than other people. We'll put that out there.
Some other people, yes.
Yes. So, but I feel like if someone's like, don't come into work that day, I'm like, all right, sounds good.
True.
I don't care what the reason behind you not wanting me to come in for work that day is. If I get to stay home from work, I'm good.
Yeah, but I know where you work, and it's not.
Well, yeah.
It's not a cool science fiction magazine. So yeah, Benny lists a bunch of famous black writers, but Pabst is like, yeah, but those are lame intellectual writers. I mean, go look at that picture of the Mantis and the Naked Lady and tell me how intellectual we're trying to be around here.
Well, according to this, the picture of the Mantis and the Naked Lady is supposed to be a parody of King Kong. However, it may also be a reference to the novella The Savage Swarm by Harlan Ellison.
Ah. So yeah, Rossoff tries to push back, but Pabst won't budge. It's not that I don't like black people, it's just that I want to pander to other people who don't like black people. It's his general...
Very important difference, yeah.
Right. Benny is sad and defeated, and the whole office is embarrassed on his behalf. So yeah, that night Benny is on his way home, but he drops his drawing of Deep Space Nine and runs afoul of two incredibly unpleasant cops, Ducat Cop and Weyun Cop.
Yep.
They give Benny a hard time, then send him on his way. Ducat Cop says, "This city's going to hell." I mean, did you see the way that black guy in a nice suit just dropped that piece of paper on the ground?
Yeah, I love, it's like, you're getting off easy this time. Next time we'll run you in for walking and having a piece of paper. It's, But apparently, so this is the scene where the picture gets a footprint on it, because one of the cops steps on it. And John Eves stated in an interview that he was in charge of the Deep Space Nine drawing getting its footprint. To accomplish this, he saw a woman in the corridors wearing combat boots and asked her to step on it. He didn't realize until he was told later that woman was Jerry Ryan, who was in costume for filming The Killing Game Part 2, and that was part of her French Resistance costume, was the big combat boots.
Oh, nice. Wait, French Resistance costume?
Yeah, that's those are the episodes where
was
the
that
Herosian
a
have taken over. Yes, the Herosian have taken over the ship, and they're using the holodecks to, like, hunt people, but they've brainwashed them to believe they're really part of these holodeck
I remember
stories.
that one now. Yeah, they think they're fighting World War II or whatever.
Yeah, but the Herosian are Nazis for some reason.
Wow, so they were filming that World War II one at the same time we're filming this 50s one? That's interesting.
Oh, wow, yeah, that is interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Is it safe to just have people take those original drawings home with them? Like, in case this exact thing happens? But
I don't know. It looked like they were prints using like a Mimeo or something. So I assume that they have other copies.
Yeah,
like the purple ink is usually a giveaway about the Mimeo machine.
Yeah, and well, don't you also use that like colored ink for like rough, and then you do the final drawing on paper on top of that or whatever?
Yeah, okay.
Then Benny passes Joe Sisko, but he's wearing a priest's frock and saying some crazy cryptic stuff about the prophets. But he tells Ben to write the words and show the people the glory of what is to come, the truth that will set them free. So Benny goes home, puts on some jazz music, and starts writing. Captain Benjamin Sisko sat looking out the window. Not the best first sentence I ever heard, but definitely not the worst either.
No, yeah, there's worse.
Then Benny catches a glimpse of his reflection in the window. For a moment, he sees himself as Captain Sisko. He gets to work busily typing. The next morning, or a later morning or something, he walks into a diner where his girlfriend Cassie works. And she's got good news. The diner owner might be willing to sell to them. Benny can give up that dumb writing stuff and become a diner proprietor. The American dream.
With what money, I don't know. But,
right.
Like, she implies in the scene that he makes very little money from his writing, and she is a waitress. So I don't know how we're buying a diner, but it was the 50s. So.
Maybe she's got some sort of deal worked out. Maybe she's got savings. Who knows? But Benny has bigger dreams than owning a diner. Then the Wharf baseball player guy comes in. It's that famous boundary-smashing African-American player for the New York Giants, Willie Hawkins. Catchphrase, "You hear the game last night?" He robbed Snyder of a tater. So,
yeah.
Impressive.
Yep. So, apparently in the original outline...
Snyder was going to have that tater, and he robbed it.
in the Zikri, however you say his name, in his outline, Michael Dorn's character was not a baseball player, but a boxer. And he was romantically involved with a white woman, which was discovered by the racist policeman who subsequently beat him to death.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, that's probably a change for the better. Especially, you got to keep it baseball with Deep Space Nine.
That actually, yeah, you're right. That is appropriate. Yeah. Also, in that version, Armin Shimmerman's character takes Russell's breakdown as an opportunity to go ahead and publish his story, the Benjamin Sisko story. So we're not there yet, but that was part of the same note.
So Rossoff steals the story, or
I don't know. It the way it's phrased here makes it sound like it's a good thing that he did this. So maybe he gives credit where credit is. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because there's a thing about the ending that kind of annoys me. But well, at least one thing. But anyway, Willie immediately starts getting sweet on Cassie, but she's too smooth for him. She puts him off.
Yep.
Cassie asks Willie why he still lives uptown with all his success, and he says because here, people admire him. Out there, he's just another colored boy who can hit a curveball. Then he goes off to hit on a table of giggling, legally aged women, I hope. And in this scene, I think he has the best costume of the episode. Like a maroon suit and a white fedora. Then we get Jimmy, the Jake Sisko character. And as we've said, he's doing a thing. He's the fast-talking, streetwise, overconfident youngster. He immediately tries to sell Benny a stolen watch. Benny is like, no, you should stop doing that. And also, it's super dangerous. And also, you strike me as the world's most incompetent criminal. So,
I mean, he's really not good at it.
Yeah. Then Jimmy makes fun of Benny, who came up with these names, I don't know, for writing stories about white people on the moon. And Benny is like, no, I just wrote a story about black people. And Jimmy is like, black people on the moon? And Benny is like, well, yeah, basically. Jimmy almost seems interested, but for now he has to go move that hot watch. And I'm sure there's some note about white people on the moon being a reference to the famous poem, Whitey on the Moon.
No. Oh. Although, the note about this scene is it's the only episode of Star Trek to contain the racial slur that Jimmy says in this scene.
No, I think he says that in the later scene.
Oh, is the later scene. Also, yeah. The episode has the unique utterance, "For Christ's sake," by Douglas Pabst. Both of these have been censored in re-airings.
So back in the offices of Incredible Tales or whatever, all the writers pass around loose sheets of Benny's story in a very disorganized looking fashion.
It does look so bad. I was upset just watching it.
I was like, don't handle my story like that, please. Mr. Pabst's new secretary, Darlene Kursky, is also there. She's Dax. And is intrigued by a character from the story with a worm in her belly. Which I don't know what she read on that page to make her react like that. It was like, and she had a worm in her belly. But the verdict is unanimous. The story is a masterpiece. Especially the part where the brave captain poisons an entire planet with chemical weapons.
That's my favorite part, for sure.
Kay identifies with the strong female first officer character. And Ritterhouse can't wait to get to work, drawing some Cardassians. But Pabst doesn't like it. The story does not get the Pabst blue ribbon. So I'm not gonna continue talking until he laughs at that. The commander in the story is a black man. We can't have that in a science fiction story. That might cause a race riot. Which is a thing he literally says.
Yeah.
And this is where he gets into the commie versus fascist argument with Rossoff.
So apparently, there's a mirror here because, Rossoff calls Pabst a fascist, but in the episode The Ascent, Quark calls Odo a fascist.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Also, apparently, while the story never makes it clear for sure whether or not Rossoff is a communist, in subsequent interviews, Armin Shimmerman has pretty firmly said that yes, he is a communist.
Okay. I think it's pretty clear that he has some pretty forward ideas.
Well, that's true. Yeah. And I mean,
he's not a communist.
He talks about in these interviews how it's like, yes, I mean, he's a communist, but it's the middle of the Red Scare, so, blah, blah, blah. But he's also like, this is the only guy really standing up for this, for Benny, and he feels like he's finally getting the chance to put a little bit of his own personality in there, where he's like, I'm this super left-leaning guy, and now I get to play that instead of Quark, the personification of
capitalism.
Capitalism, thank you, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And as, many people have pointed this out, but at this time, if you believed in ideas desegregation, race equality, pretty much the only place you could go with those ideas was the Communist Party. These were not mainstream ideas at all, like they are today. So I think a lot of people kind of lose sight of that when looking back at communists of old. Oh, and but Pabst does praise Albert for his robot story. So
Good job.
Albert can really write a robot story.
Mm.
Pabst gives Benny an ultimatum: turn the captain white or write a different story. But he offers him a novella and the cover, so I don't know. It sounds pretty good.
Mm.
But you have to write it based on this drawing. You can't write an original story. And no black characters. So Benny goes to the diner to sulk. Cassie tries to comfort him. And Jimmy says, "I told you so," which he didn't, but whatever. He's convinced nothing will ever change now or 100 years from now, and that's where he says the first N-word in Star Trek. And maybe, hopefully, the last. I don't know. Cassie says, "Well, there's no black space station captains, but there are black diner owners. Also, why don't you get a black newspaper to publish your story?" But Benny is convinced a black newspaper wouldn't want to publish a science fiction story, which, personally to me, it sounds like there's an opening in the market for a black-oriented science fiction magazine. But
yeah, there you
go. Too bad Quark isn't here to explain that to him.
You can print it out of the back of your diner.
Yeah. Get one of those little printing presses or Mimeo machines or whatever.
Yeah.
Then a hand grabs Benny's shoulder. A Klingon hand. "Hear the game last night?" says Worf. Oh no, it's actually just Willie. But Benny freaks out and falls off his stool. And Willie's like, "So you didn't hear the game last night?" And then Benny stumbles out and tells Cassie he'll pick her up for their date at 10. Now, maybe I'm an old fogey, but what the heck are they doing at 10? Like, I can count on one, like, well, maybe two hands, the places that are open that aren't just like bars after 10 in this town. But New York is the city that never sleeps, so who knows? Maybe they're going to Whataburger. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a date right there.
Right. That's a good old-fashioned date. Midnight at Whataburger. Willie tries to get in the before 10 time slot with Cassie, but she shoots him down. That night, Benny runs into this crazy street preacher again, who again tells him to write the words. So Benny turns around and goes the exact opposite direction he was going. So I guess what was going on here was he was going to pick up Cassie for their date, but then he just turned around and went home to start writing instead. He is awakened by Cassie, who tells him he missed their date. It's after midnight now, so 2 hours after the date was supposed to start. They make it up with a little bit of late night dancing, and no, that's not a euphemism. But Benny starts flashing back and forth between this life and Captain Sisko on Deep Space Nine. He tells Cassie he thinks he's losing his mind. Later at the Sci-Fi magazine offices, Pabst tells Benny, "Have you lost your mind?" Apparently, instead of writing the novella Pabst asked for, Benny turned in 6 more Captain Sisko stories. So it's like, in this one, Captain Sisko's son falls in love with an imagination vampire. Yep. In this one, Captain Sisko plays hopscotch. In this one, the captain's son gives him a Willie Mays baseball card. Willie who?
Yeah, exactly.
You mean Willie Hawkins? But then Albert comes up with a brilliant idea. Why don't you make the whole story a dream? The dream of some downtrodden black person hoping for a better future. Wouldn't that make the social message of the story more obvious? And don't readers famously hate stories that are dreams? Or visions from wormhole aliens or whatever? But Pabst seems open to the idea, and Benny is willing to make that small compromise to get his inspiring vision of the future published.
There you go. Everybody wins.
Yeah. In a good mood, Benny runs into Jimmy on the street. But Jimmy seems distracted. He's got some business to get to. Big time business. Benny watches Jimmy run off, suspecting that Jimmy probably isn't talking about his small business loan getting approved. Benny runs to the diner where Willie is recapping the game last night. "You hear the game last night, Benny?" "Dude, shut up. You're not going to become the main character of this story, no matter how hard you try."
Oh, he is. He already is. You just don't understand.
That's the secret to this episode. It's all about Willie. Benny shares his good news. That night, he and Cassie go out dancing to celebrate, and she wears her red dress. They run into Crazy Preacher Guy, who says, "Good job, but watch out, you've got rough times coming." He does an ear grab paw check on Benny and warns him that hope and despair walk arm in arm. Then he backs off into the shadows like Sam Neill in Event Horizon. Then gunshots ring out. Benny runs over and finds officers Ducat and Weiyun standing over Jimmy's dead body, shot while trying to break into a car. Benny is upset, so the cops beat the crap out of him, occasionally turning into the real Ducat and Weiyun.
Yeah, apparently, like, Casey Biggs was supposed to be in here somewhere, the guy who plays Damar, but he was in New York City at the time and could not spare time for making it to film this episode.
Ironically, the episode that takes place in New York City.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you telling me they didn't film in New York City? A few weeks later, Benny is on the mend, but walking with a cane. He goes to the office to see his story come off the press. While the whole writing staff waits, Benny hears the good news that Albert sold a robot novel to Gnome Press. So I guess that's this universe's iRobot or something. But then Pabst comes in and delivers the bad news. The entire run of this month's issue has been pulped. The owner apparently didn't like the issue for unspecified reasons. But we all know what's up. Oh, also Benny is fired.
Unrelated completely, obviously, to what happened.
Yeah.
But,
I don't know why at that point you just can't come out and say, we don't like black people, but whatever. This sends Benny over the edge. He breaks down in hysterics, insisting that Captain Sisko and Deep Space Nine are real, and nobody can take that away. You cannot destroy an idea. He created the future, and it's real. He collapses on the floor, and then the men in white coats come to carry him off. In the ambulance, Benny sees the preacher one more time. The preacher assures him he has walked in the path of the prophets, and there is no greater glory. Benny asks, "Please tell me, who am I?" And the preacher says, "You are the dreamer and the dream."
Oh, that's very helpful.
Yeah. And Benny looks up to see that the ambulance is flying at warp speed through space. Then Captain Sisko wakes up in the infirmary, and Bashir informs him that his brain patterns have returned to normal. Sisko heads home and sits with his dad, who is packed and ready to get back to Earth. He asks Ben what he plans to do, and Ben says he's going to stay and finish the job he started. And if he fails, and then Joe continues the thought by quoting the Bible, "I have fought the good fight," etc., etc. Ben is surprised. "I've never known you to quote the Bible."
But Ben knows the Bible, so 2 Timothy 4:7, apparently.
Ah, nice.
For anyone who wants to go out and read the whole thing. Also, there's a fun note about the scene where he falls to the ground. Apparently, Avery Brooks got real into the acting in that scene, and he just fell to the ground and stayed there. And first assistant director Lou Race was shooting the scene, and he goes, he falls to the floor, and I'm saying, well, I gotta say cut, but how long should I let this go on? And he's like, if I'd stood there for half an hour, I think he would have kept on. He was very committed to the part and very committed to the scene.
Nice.
And Nana Visitor recalls that, like, even after they call cut, he's just like, he keeps laying there, and he was like, she says, like, I know what that feels like as an actor. You're gone, and he was gone.
Did he put a switch in his brain?
Maybe, yeah.
So yeah, Joe says he's full of surprises, and so has Ben. Sounds like that dream helped him sort things out. And this is where things get a little weird, and Captain Sisko stares directly into the camera and wonders, what if none of this is real? What if Benny Russell is the real one and we're just figments of his imagination? Somewhere beyond all those stars, Benny is dreaming of us. Or maybe Ira Stephen Bear or something, I don't know. And then he gets up and looks out the window and sees his reflection as Benny. And Joe just sits there and is like, what? The end.
So apparently there's, I can't tell if it's the same story getting mixed in two different ways in the notes in here, or if it's actually two different things, but either, or maybe both, either this episode or the final episode of the series, there was talk about ending the episode with, like, Benny Russell outside a soundstage holding a script that said Deep Space Nine. And then they were like, oh, yeah, we probably shouldn't do that. Because, like, as interesting and great as that might be, I don't agree. But they're like, you know, as awesome as that could be for this, it brings into question all of the other Star Trek series also.
Yeah.
So that just like screws up the chronology for everything.
This quickly puts us into the kids staring into a snow globe problem.
Yeah. And I like, there's a quote even from Zikri, whatever, however you say his name, where he's like, yeah, that would have been interesting, but it would have screwed up everything. Rick Berman is right to say that if DS9 is a dream, then what about the original Star Trek? What about the Next Generation? What about all the other shows coming down the pike? So he's like, so I guess Rick was right. It would have been interesting, but also would have hugely pissed off fans. And he goes, in retrospect, it's okay that they didn't do that. Thank you, Mr. Zikri. I'm glad that they got your approval.
This just, I just don't, I don't understand what's happening. Like, is Benny Russell a real person, or does he exist in a parallel universe, or like, did the prophets give a real writer a vision of Captain Sisko, or what's going on here? I don't know. Well, yeah, like that whole thing where the court-martial was a short story appearing in Galaxy magazine. It's like, what? It's like, what kind of weird meta thing is going on in this story? But
yeah, I don't know. I have no answer for this.
Yeah.
Other random notes. Episode first aired during Black History Month, which, according to Ron Moore, was not planned, just a coincidence. Adam Nimoy, son of Leonard Nimoy, quoted as saying this is one of his favorite episodes. You have to understand the history to get the episode, but it may be some of the best television ever made.
Mm-hmm.
So, big fan in Adam Nimoy.
Yeah, glad we got Adam Nimoy weighing in on that.
In Mark Scott Zikri's original pitch, the story actually focused on Jake Sisko, and instead of having visions, he actually traveled through time to the 1950s and met a group of struggling science fiction writers. However, at the end of the episode, it was revealed he never time traveled at all, and it was a trick being played on him by an alien who wanted to learn about humanity. And Ira Stephen Bear's like, nah, that's dumb. There's no bottom to that story, he says. And so he turned it down, but he kept that idea like in the back of his head and eventually came up with this other story to stick it into. So,
I mean, I was thinking it would make way more sense if Benny, the writer, was Jake Sisko, but
yeah, that's true. I hadn't considered that.
Yeah. He, like, the entire story could be exactly the same, just like Benny is played by Sarah Clofton. And he doesn't see himself as Ben Sisko. He, like, you know, imagines Ben Sisko as a figure to look up to or something. I don't know.
Instead of getting shot robbing a car.
Yeah. Well, maybe he can also get shot robbing a car. I don't know. Yeah, you can.
Oh yeah, at the end he gets fired from his science fiction writing job, and then he has to turn to car robbery.
Sure.
So you might expect that Armin Shimmerman, who has to wear all this makeup every week, would be kind of relieved to be able to come in like 3 hours later every day and not have to wear all the makeup. But he said that it was actually slightly off-putting. He says, I've grown accustomed to the Quark mask being a mechanism for support. That face describes who I am as an alien character. And also, many actors worry about how they look on camera. I don't, because my face isn't actually on camera. So it was bizarre to be barefaced on a Star Trek show. I never had been before.
You think that'd help him get into the mindset of a different character? Yeah,
right? There's several quotes about the art department and just how much fun everyone had doing this big episode where they got to do all this, all this backgrounds, all these new paintings, and there's, wardrobe. Everyone had to do a bunch of work here, and they all seem to enjoy getting to do something different, is kind of what I'm getting.
There were a lot of, like, locations and sets and stuff in this episode.
Yeah, there really were. Benny's character caused some fans to be reminded of Samuel R. Delany, an African-American science fiction writer who started in the early 60s, a few years after this episode is set. Delany has recalled that his 1967 novel Nova was rejected by Campbell due to the feeling that sci-fi readers were not ready for a black protagonist.
Some truth to that, after all.
Nova was ultimately published by Doubleday and received a nomination for the 1969 Hugo Award. So, I guess, screw your loss, Campbell. You didn't get the awesome story.
Yep.
Avery Brooks phoned Delany, whom he'd never previously met, and jokingly asked, "Do you know who this is?" Although other reports suggest that it was actually Delany who phoned Brooks.
and said, "Do you know who this is?"
Yeah, I don't know. They talked on the phone at some point, and both have in interviews positive things to say about the other.
Oh, nice. Was this call before the episode or after the episode?
I assume that it must have been after.
Yeah.
There's a lot. This is a very notes-heavy episode in here, but they're not all like.
Yeah, I imagine.
There's like Ronald D. Moore's like, this is one of the best episodes in the entire franchise. Okay, cool. Zikri comments that Ira Bear was responsible for this story existing, and he went to bat for it. He had to convince the studio to do an episode overtly about racism, where a teenager breaks into a car and gets shot by racist cops. And he says, watching it now, 20 years later, it has maybe even more power than it did then.
So that would be like 2015 or 2018. So yeah, stuff was going on.
Avery Brooks talks about how the people in this office are living in this really interesting time period because they're dealing with McCarthyism, the atomic bomb, all that sort of stuff. So he really tried to get these characters to come across as part of this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was interesting that there seemed to be a little bit more of an effort towards like historical accuracy, like putting the atomic H-bomb test and stuff. I wonder if there's like a Ferengi spaceship that used that to fly back in time. I don't know.
Could be.
As opposed to Little Green Men, where I think we noted several pretty major historical inaccuracies with that one, but historical accuracy wasn't really the point of that episode, I guess.
I mean, yeah. Yeah. Avery Brooks talks about how this is like probably some favorite moments in the entire 7-year run. He appreciated the episode so much that when asked to sum up his feelings about it, Brooks smiled and said, it should have been a 2-parter.
Huh.
But he also notes that the episode is not just about racism. Actually, hold on. What he says, the people thought it was about racism. Well, maybe so, maybe not. But the fact of the matter is, far beyond the stars, is that you have a man who's essentially was conceiving of something for people far beyond what people around him had ever imagined, and therefore they thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that it was far beyond what they had imagined. I mean, like, Pork Guy was supporting you, but whatever, you know.
Oh my gosh, a black person in charge? This cannot be.
But other than the title notes, I think that's all the ones worth pulling out.
Okay, so we can jump into reviews.
What did you think of this episode?
Okay, so, well, I've got a few things. So I guess I'll go back to what Adam Nimoy said, which is, a lot of people didn't really understand the history of it, and I didn't understand the history of it when I was a teenager. I wasn't fully tuned into, like, the history and the social context surrounding Star Trek and, like, what the goals of Star Trek and stuff were. And now I think I understand the episode a lot better. I mean, maybe just because of my perception of Ira Stephen Bear, but the episode on one hand feels a little bit self-congratulatory, like look at the power of science fiction or whatever, but overall I do like the point it makes about kind of the science fiction being this world of imagination where you can tell stories not just about, like, robots and spaceships, and that's all cool, but also about, like, social ideas and commentary on the world as it is now and the way it could be and stuff like that, which is what Star Trek was always meant to be. So, and watching it now, it kind of also comes off as, like, a really kind of elegant response to those people who, like, you do an episode with, like, 2 women kissing, and then the whole world's like, keep your politics out of Star Trek or whatever. So,
yeah.
I don't know. Like, seeing it now, like, as an adult with, like, those eyes really, I think, improves the story or improves the episode. I felt like they really recreated the world of the 50s really well, and I really liked that. Although I didn't live in the 50s, but it seemed authentic to me. And, it just felt big. It felt like it was in the real world. They, I think, obviously put a lot of effort into it. I thought the direction was great. There was no, I don't think Avery Brooks told anybody to weird it up this episode, so that's good. I liked I liked a lot of the performances, Avery Brooks especially. some of the like fast talking Sirach Lofton Jimmy and stuff like that was a little bit like, I guess my main complaint is the ending where, well, several aspects of the ending. Number one is that it ends without the story ever being published or anybody ever reading it. It just still lives in Benny Russell's mind, which would be okay, except that, because my takeaway was that Captain Sisko becomes aware that his position of a black man being in charge of a space station could be like a really inspirational thing to a black person living in America in the 50s or whatever. He should be aware of that progress that's been made, and that's why he like decides to recommit himself to his mission or whatever. But it's like the story never gets published and Benny Russell goes to the loony bin. So some about that didn't quite dovetail quite right for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
And the kind of meta commentary where he stares into the camera is like, maybe this is all fiction. Like, what show is it where it's like, maybe this is all some, I think it's another Star Trek. It's like, maybe this is all a recreation and someone's watching us on some kind of holodeck or something. I don't know. I was like, no, please don't go there. I got the point already. You didn't have to do that. And you doing that made it weird. But, overall, I really liked it a lot more than I did, watching it like way back then. So this may be a really high review compared to what you do in a second. I don't know, but I'm gonna give it the full captain.
Wow. Okay. Cool. That fits with the popular view of the episode, I would say.
Mm.
Okay, so I tend to like episodes where the actors get to do some different stuff.
Sure.
Where they get to kind of stretch their muscles and show off that they can play different from what we've seen them play every episode. And so there's definitely some fun moments of that. I like the way that Colm Meaney gives his character like this little stutter and he's like, you don't see them that much, but I think that the main actors do a pretty good job of being these different characters. I don't know, Cop Dukat and Cop Wayoon. It felt to me like Avery Brooks was like weirded up a little to them. But
you think so?
But I like seeing, like I said, I like seeing them get the chance to mix things up. And I also I tend to agree with you about it. Definitely reads differently watching it now, and being sort of more aware of the history and the importance of some of these messages than when I was a teenager or younger than that, whatever, when the episode came out. So that plays into it. I also like what you said about it feeling kind of like self-congratulatory, because anytime writers write about like how writers can change the world or something, it's like, come on, guys. But I mean, they're the only ones who can write about that. Yeah. So,
or when Hollywood does a movie about how great Hollywood is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all that said, I don't like the episode. And there's multiple reasons for it. I agree that the end, it feels kind of off-putting, almost as bad as if they'd gone with the idea of like, we'll end it with him standing there with a script for Deep Space Nine, and it's all really part of the ending bothers me. But even beyond that, just this sort of episode, okay, for one thing, somehow the experience that he goes through solves the crisis that he was having about whether or not he's like accomplishing anything as the captain of Deep Space Nine. And I don't see where the two overlap. Yeah. Like, I get that it's like, you would be inspirational to someone in the 50s. What does that have to do with the crisis that he was having? Like, I don't see it. So the thing that they're trying to tell me is the purpose of the entire episode doesn't feel legit. I don't see how it fits. But beyond that, I don't like these episodes where a bunch of weird stuff happens that has no importance anywhere else.
Uh-huh.
Like this, either this was all a dream or vision sent by the prophets or whatever it was. Like, why was his brain getting those weird potentials again? We're not given any reason that they started or stopped, other than he apparently needed to see this, and so maybe that's what it was, even though the prophets have never chosen to communicate in this way before. So it's a bunch of crap that happens with no real explanation and ends with no real explanation and doesn't have any effect, including the effect that the episode claims that it had. It just doesn't make any sense. I really hate that. I hate when episodes do that, when we go through this whole rigmarole and then none of it means anything.
Mm.
And that bothers me. What also bothers me, and other people may disagree with this, I'm in Star Trek so long that the idea that we've done since the original series practically is that Star Trek addresses the ills of human society through the medium of, you call it an allegory or whatever, by using after humans have overcome their problems, you use these alien stories to reflect what we're going through with Roddenberry's vision that humans have grown beyond this. So whenever we do an episode that's like, even though we've gone back in time to the 50s, so it makes sense. Whenever we do this episode where our modern, future, whatever, in the show's modern day, where the characters are like, man, look at how racist humans are, or look at, how all these problems that the humans had, the humans are smoking, or blah, blah, whatever.
Uh-huh.
I'm just like, it bothers me because I'm like, no, you're supposed to have grown beyond this. You are supposed to be the point in our society where even starting to remember that, like hundreds of years ago, you're like, man, we were stupid back then. It sure is good that we're beyond this now. So when we deep dive into, like, look at human evil and hatred and these things that we're supposed to have grown beyond, it bothers me because I'm like, that's not what we're supposed to be doing here. We're supposed to be the society that has grown beyond that, and then we're addressing that kind of tangentially through interpretations of interactions with other groups. And so it just feels like a betrayal of some of the core ideals of Star Trek, which we've gotten away from in ways that are beneficial in Deep Space Nine. Since Roddenberry's death, the characters are allowed to have conflicts with each other, which makes storytelling better. We've definitely benefited from getting away from some of those core concepts. I'm not going to be a purist who's like, Roddenberry's vision must always be respected, because I think that in a lot of ways he was holding it back from making it as good as it could have been. But this is one that hangs up for me, where I'm just like, it's upsetting for me to see Cisco focus on hundreds of years ago there was racism, because I want our characters in our story to be so far beyond that they're not even worried about it anymore. If we're still echoing, if these horrible things in human society are still echoing 300 years from now, and people are still pissed off about them 300 years from now, then I feel like we have failed. We've never accomplished the things that we really should have accomplished already, let alone 300 years from now. And that, it bothers me to see that. So that really just makes me viscerally not like the episode, in addition to the other stuff I've pointed out. So this is like, at the same time, I have to respect, like, the story that we're telling, even though it's not an alien society, we're managing to tell within this microcosm of the past, like, a very interesting and meaningful story. And I can see, especially having grown older now, like, how impactful this could be for people in the 90s, today, whenever. So I can't put it, like, all the way down. Like, if you'd asked me when I was a teenager, I probably would have been like, no, this is like an ensign. I hate this. I'm past that a little bit, but it's not an episode that I want to watch often. It's not one that I enjoy watching, and so it's below the line for me, and I'll probably call it a lieutenant.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I usually have that same complaint when, they just ditch metaphor or analogy or whatever, and just like they go back like in season 2 of Picard, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, look at this immigration crisis" or whatever.
Yeah. That was so in your face with the immigration thing, yeah.
Yeah, this is no. This one feels a little bit like in a gray area for me, because it's not like they went back to the year 1998 and were like, "Oh my gosh, look at this racism." It was. It's almost like setting it in the 50s, kind of like it allowed the progress, since 1953 to kind of apply to both the era of the viewer and the era of Captain Sisko or whatever. I don't know.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I can see that.
So, and then it almost kind of becomes a message of, I don't know, don't forget the progress that's been made or whatever. But from a realistic point of view, it's like, what was 400 years ago? Like 1624? Like, think of all the progress we've made since 1624. I mean, how often do you think about that or whatever? So
that's true. What was happening in the 1600s?
I think the King James Bible was getting published. I don't know,
Kepler published his laws of planetary motion in 1609.
Right. So,
Pocahontas was 1606. So, some of that still gets talked about today.
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
Pilgrims arrive in 1620 on the Mayflower.
Oh yeah.
Taj Mahal's built in 1631. So,
but yeah, you usually versus whatever was happening in like the 1650s compared to then or whatever. I don't think we were really as in tuned to what was going on back then as they were back then. So I don't know. Just from a purely like analytical, logical, realistic point of view, it's a little bit weird. But the story is very overtly meta, and like, I guess as much as I was put off by that weird looking into the camera stuff, at least it kind of signals to the viewer, hey, we're making a commentary about fiction here or whatever. So don't
yeah, it's true.
It's just a story, don't worry too much about it or something. I don't know. And also, I don't know if you're aware of this, but a few days ago was the day the Bell riots were supposed to have taken place.
Yes. Yep. I had some people telling me about that.
So there's been lots of commentary on that. Weirdly, no commentary on the 2024 events from season 2 of Star Trek Picard. Nobody seems as concerned about that. That whole season of Star Trek Picard, which takes place at the same time, but not, but the 2-part episode of Deep Space Nine from 30 years ago. That's the one everybody's focused on. So.
Well, it's more impressive when you make predictions from 30 years ago that might come true, as opposed to like 3 years ago.
True. And it's not like we have sanctuary districts and are fully, but I mean, we have kind of, issues going on in that neighborhood. We are not sending missions to Europa and stuff like that. So
no, sadly.
In a way, Deep Space Nine did a better job predicting the future.
I've seen some of the Project 2025 proposals that feel a little bit Sanctuary District-ish. So
yeah, must not get too political. But
no, yeah. Titles.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of the title? Far Beyond I'm sure it's a reference to something, but I'm drawing a blank.
Well, okay. So first, apparently the working title was The Cold and Distant Stars, which was more or less the exact same working title for the episode that eventually became Past Tense Part 1. So, which is what we were just talking about. So, interesting.
Yeah, whoa. I don't see how that would apply to Past Tense Part 1 at all.
No.
And really this episode either.
Yeah. So, the note in here, this feels to me very much like one of those notes that somebody put in there because... and isn't actually probably in any way true.
A really tenuous connection that they noticed with something else. Okay.
I don't even know if you could call it a tenuous connection. I don't know if there's a connection at all, but I will read you the note.
All right.
Far Beyond the Stars, the title, is most probably referencing the story surrounding the production of the comics Judgment Day, written by Al Feldstein and drawn by Joe Orlando, in which an astronaut working for the Galactic Republic, an equivalent of the Federation, assesses a planet of robots for joining and ultimately rejects their candidacy due to their color-based racism. In the very last panel of the comic, the astronaut is revealed to be black of skin, with the text reading, "And inside the ship, the man removes his space helmet and shook his head, and the instrument light made the beads of perspiration on his dark skin twinkle like," and then they put in bold, "distant stars." The Comic Code administrator, Judge Murphy, required of the editor Gaines to censor the black character. Feldstein reported having replied to the judge, "For God's sake, Judge Murphy, that is the whole point of the curse words story." The story was eventually printed uncensored, despite the judge's opposition.
What?
But the magazine suffered for this daring act.
Why did the judge want to censor the black character? Just because he was black?
Yes. I mean, it seems like one of those moments where it's like, no, people won't want to read this if the main character that they've been relating to this whole time turns out to be black.
Man, that's...
Because, it didn't mention the year in there, but this was like a 1953 comic. So
Sure. Oh, interesting. I mean, sometimes you hear that stuff and you're just like, I can't believe... It's like, I cannot believe that level of racism existed. But then I hear some stuff people say today, and...
Yeah.
I cannot believe this stuff. It's like, I was telling you about the video I was watching about the guy who was like, I saw people walking around in full Hindu outfits. And it was meant to be, he's like, oh my goodness, in America? I was like, anyway.
People, yeah.
Yeah, so Far Beyond the Stars, that's what we're talking about, the title.
Yes.
It's memorable, at least.
I agree.
Without it being a reference to something, I kind of have trouble finding the exact relevance, but I guess it just refers to, like, imagination and, that world far beyond the stars or whatever. So, yeah, I guess it's a pretty good title. I
think it's a fine title. I definitely remember it. And yeah. I can connect it with what the episode is pretty easily. For somehow it conjures up, like, you're on Deep Space Nine, you go beyond the stars, and then you come out of, like, a book. Like, that's the picture that I get in my brain when I see Far Beyond the Stars. So I get it. It's memorable. Yeah. I don't think it's amazing or anything, but it's fine.
Sure. I mean, the cold and distant stars, that sounds like a story about just how, like, horrible and uncaring the universe is, or something like that.
It does. That's exactly what it sounds like, yeah.
So, I don't know why anybody thought that would be a good title for a Star Trek episode, but it's like the Dominion takes over the Federation, and there's just no hope and no justice, and then the cold and distant stars watch dispassionately, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's the direction we're going with Star Trek.
I can't wait for that episode.
I'll put that on the list. So anyway, yeah, I guess. Oh my god, we better wrap the episode up there. So unless you have any final thoughts.
No, I'm good.
Okay, so yep, that's our discussion of Far Beyond the Stars. Thank you for listening. If you like that, maybe you'll like our discussion of Rapture or Past Tense. Why not? Or the Little Green Men.
You sure see the Magnificent Frankie, and I'm like, well, that's a good one too. Why not? Sure.
Yeah, that's a good one. Go listen to that one. You can find those all past episodes, maybe future episodes if you're listening in the future, wherever you're listening to this. But if you want to leave a comment and for us to actually see it, you do that on YouTube. But my name is Fletcher. About to say goodbye is Data.
Adios.
We look forward to seeing you next week. But remember, did you hear the game last night?